Okay, so I am Naama Farjoun. I am an Israeli citizen and advocate and activist for Palestine and against the Israeli occupation, apartheid, genocide for over 40 years. Obviously, the intensity now is beyond the usual. I got involved in helping the organization of the conference as part of the European Jews for Palestine network, in which I'm a representative for Israelis Against Apartheid. Also a member of Boycott from Within, and recently active in the initiative of Israeli citizens call for sanctions, which we have almost 4,000 signatures of Israeli citizens in Israel and abroad. That's me. And today we are in this session, we have some very interesting guests. We are going to talk about the complex experiences of Arab Jews in relation to their identity and erasure. Just to say, it seems hard for me now to talk about something that doesn't seem to directly stop the carnage and genocide that is going on and the criminal efforts of Israel and the West to shatter the Arab world and the Middle East. We are all on edge. The people in Gaza are in the dark, living in a hell on earth and expecting the worst. Gaza is incommunicable, no electricity, no water, no food, and the bombs, shells, bullets don't stop. We are looking into the abyss, and it's expanding. The Hunger Games are at a crucial point of intensified genocidal tactics, and it's not getting better. We are failing, the people of Gaza. However, I think that to build our resistance in the medium and long run, our issue is actually quite central and useful. What we are going to talk about today, and surprisingly, there have been quite a few references yesterday to the issue, which I didn't expect. So, Mizrahim, or Mizrahi Jews, is the term used in Israel to describe people who are part of the Jewish collective, but have origins in Arab or Muslim countries. Literally, it means Easterns, but it refers to a population from the south and east of the Mediterranean, also to some extent the Balkan, many of whom are descendants of the Jewish population expelled from Al-Andalus, of which we heard yesterday, together with the Muslim population by the Christian kings and the church, also known as Sephardi Jews, for those of you who are still trying to figure out this language. Jewish communities that were integrated in North Africa, Palestine, Sham, Iraq, Iran, Yemen, Turkey, etc. These communities were stripped of their cultural heritage, their language, their strength as a community upon arriving to the Zionist entity after its creation in Palestine or on Palestine. This is not about identity politics as I understand it. It's not only a racial identity we're talking about. Rather, the Mizrahi groups and activism within the Jewish left aim to build a political identity. So being a Mizrahi is not necessarily a racial identity, but also a political identity. In this session, we will hear about movement between social, cultural, and political realities in this context, about resisting the demand and expectations of the European Zionist movement to be part of the forceful dispossession and colonization of Palestine, while denying the Arab identity of Arab Jews, or Jewish Arabs, reclaiming our Arab past, present, and future. So, we are going to start with Reuven Abergel, born in 1943 in Rabat, Morocco, the fourth of 8 children, immigrated to Israel in 1950 with his family. They were sent to the... Okay, they were, they immigrated to occupied Palestine in 1950 Thank you for the correction. The family was sent to immigration immigrant camp in Palästina, and later were moved to Musrara, a former Palestinian neighborhood in East Jerusalem, whose residents were expelled and forced to abandon their homes during the occupation in 1948. Reuven Abergel has been a social and political activist in Israel-Palestine for more than 50 years. After co-founding the Israeli Black Panthers, he participated in various movements for social and political justice, including the Peripheries bloc in the 2011 so-called uprising in Israel. Also part of the Tarabut movement, which links social and political struggles. He lives in Jerusalem. He is a father of 4, grandfather of 11, and great-grandfather of 3 children. He co-authored the book Black Panther with Tamara Verte-Zahav about his life, wrote the Haggadah of Pesach of the Black Panthers in Hebrew, which was also translated to English, strongly recommended, co-authored another book about Israel's Black Panthers. He writes poetry in Hebrew and Moroccan, Arabic, and though he never had the luxury to attend any school. Reuven.
צהריים טובים, לא באתי לדבר על ציונות ולא באתי לדבר על פלסטין, באתי לספר לכם על המפגש שלי עם התנועה הציונית ביום שעזבתי את מרוקו.
Schönen Mittag, ich bin nicht gekommen, um über den Zionismus zu sprechen und nicht über die Palästinenser. Ich will euch erzählen über mein erstes Treffen mit dem Zionismus am Tag, als ich Marokko verlassen habe.
המפגש עם התנועה הציונית היה מפגש אלים, מפגש מעליב, פוגע, והיה מאוחר מאוד להתחרט.
Dieses Treffen war brutal, war aggressiv, war unterdrückend und es war zu spät, zurückzugehen.
לא ידענו עד כמה רוע יש בקבוצה הזו.
Wir wussten nicht, wie viel Bosheit in dieser Gruppe der Zionisten ist.
אני יודע מההיסטוריה איפה שחיו היהודים במדינות הנוצריות, הם עברו את כל הפוגרומים והצרות שהיו להם במזרח אירופה ואירופה ורוסיה. במדינות האסלאם אני לא מכיר מהתקופה שאני עזבתי את מרוקו שהיה לנו את הפוגרומים האלה שהם חוו במזרח אירופה ואירופה.
Ich kenne die Geschichte der europäischen Juden, alle die Pogrome, die Unterdrückung, die sie erlebt haben. Bei uns im arabischen Raum, also spezifisch in Marokko, habe ich das nie erlebt.
כנראה שהמפגש של האשכנזים, היהודים האירופאים האלה, עם הנוצרים באירופה, התפתח אצלם, איך אומרים, מחלה פתולוגית של הגזענות שלא עוזבת אותם, וזה בתוך המבנה הנפשי שלהם.
Diese Beziehung zwischen den Europäern und den europäischen Juden hat bei den europäischen Juden offenbar eine Pathologie entwickelt, eine Krankheit, von der sie sich nicht heilen können.
וכשהם התחילו לחשוב על התנועה הציונית, אנחנו נתחיל להבין שיש לנו בעיה עם אנשים שהם לא בריאים נפשית. הם אנשים שמאמינים בעליונות שלהם על אנשים ממדינות האסלאם, על היהודים ממדינות האסלאם.
Wir haben verstanden, dass wir es mit Leuten zu tun haben, die psychisch krank sind und die tatsächlich an ihre Überlegenheit gegenüber die arabischen Juden glauben.
כאן אני מדבר בדיעבד, אחרי שאני אקים את הפנתרים עם החברים שלי, אני אתחיל להבין את הרעיונות האלה שאני מדבר עליהם.
All das habe ich natürlich erst verstanden, nachdem ich schon die Schwarzen Panther gegründet gehabt habe.
וכשהקמתי את התנועה של הפנתרים עם החברים שלנו, הפעולה הראשונה של המערכת הייתה לעצור אותנו כשלא עשינו שום דבר. חילקנו פתקים שאין בהם שום איום על השלטון.
Sie haben uns schon unterdrückt vom ersten Tag, als wir erst nur ein paar Zettel verteilt haben, um die Bewegung zu gründen.
גדלתי ברחוב, לא גדלתי על קרקע פוליטית או על איזה מקום שאני יכול ללמוד אידיאולוגית מה עושים מול מציאות כזו.
Ich bin in der Straße aufgewachsen, ich bin nicht in einer politischen Bewegung aufgewachsen, die mich unterrichtet hatte, wie man so eine Bewegung gründet.
האמת שתוך כדי מאבק נולד לי חלום חדש. רציתי, אם היה לי אפשרות, לקיים את הקונגרס האנטי-ציוני הראשון בבאזל, ובאותו יום שהם הכריזו על התנועה הציונית, רציתי להכריז על מותה באותו יום, אבל לא היה לי את הכוח לעשות את זה.
Mein Traum war es immer schon, den ersten jüdischen antizionistischen Kongress in Basel zu gründen, am selben Tag, an dem der erste zionistische Kongress gegründet wurde. Und ich wollte an diesem Kongress den Tod des Zionismus feiern und den Zionismus begraben.
הגעתי לכאן ושמעתי את כולם מדברים, ואני לא רוצה לחזור על הדברים שאמרתם שאני מסכים עם כולם.
Ich habe alles gehört, was gesagt wurde, ich will nicht wiederholen. Ich bin mit allem einverstanden.
אוקיי, מה גרם לי להתפכח? לא הייתי שיכור.
Was hat mich aufgeweckt? Was hat mich nüchtern gemacht? Ich war nicht betrunken.
מלחמת ששת הימים, הכיבוש. זה היה היום שהחיים שלי השתנו.
1967, der Krieg von 1967 und die Besatzung des Westjordansland, der Gazastreifen und so weiter, das hat mich aufgeweckt.
זה לא שהייתי בן אדם רגיש ואני נגד הכיבוש, בעד הכיבוש, נגד הציונות, בעד הציונות. לא, הסיטואציה שבה אני חייתי דחפה אותי לאנשים שהייתי קרוב אליהם. זה הפלסטינים, כי השארתי אותם במרוקו.
Es war die Lebenssituation, in der ich mich befand, und die Palästinenser, denen ich begegnet bin.
והמערכת לא אהבה את המפגש שלי עם הפלסטינים.
Und das System hat diese Begegnung sehr missbilligt.
לאט לאט התחלנו לשלם מחירים כבדים, גם אנחנו היהודים ממדינות האסלאם והפלסטינים, כי החיבור הזה כנראה איים עליהם.
Wir haben sehr schnell hohe Preise bezahlt, weil diese Begegnung offenbar für das System sehr gefährlich ist.
והפגישה הראשונה שלי עם גולדה מאיר, עם ראש הממשלה, שהסכימה לפגוש אותי עם החברים שלי, היא שאלה אותי, למה בחרתם את השם הפנתרים השחורים? הם אנטישמים, הם אנטי-ציונים. איך אתם עושים את זה?
Bei meiner ersten Begegnung mit Golda Meir, damals Premierminister, fragte sie mich, warum habt ihr diesen Namen gewählt, die Schwarzen Panther? Das sind doch Antisemiten, das sind Antizionisten.
אמרתי לה, אני לא מכיר אותם.
Ich kenne sie nicht.
הם לא מנעו ממני לא ללמוד. הם לא מנעו ממני את הבריאות. הם לא מנעו ממני שאני לא יהיה לי מה לאכול עם 10 אחים בחדר אחד, בלי מים ובלי חשמל. אז על איזה אנטישמים? אתם אנטישמים.
Sie haben nicht meine Erziehung verhindert, Sie haben nicht meine Gesundheit geschädigt, Sie haben nicht mich und 9 meiner Brüder und Schwestern in ein kleines Zimmer gestopft. Ihr sind die Antisemiten, ihr habt das gemacht.
ולקראת סיום אשתף אתכם במעשים הטובים של הציונות מול היהודים ממדינות האסלאם. כן, כן.
Ich will euch über die guten Sachen erzählen, die der Zionismus uns, den arabischen Juden, gemacht hat.
הפעולה הראשונה שנעשתה כאשר אנחנו הוציאו אותנו בהונאה, במרמה ממדינות האסלאם, הפעולה הראשונה שעשו נגדנו, שעשו הפרדות בין המנהיגות לבין האזרחים הפשוטים.
Das erste, was die Zionisten gemacht haben in unseren Gemeinden, war die Führungskräfte der Gemeinde von der Gemeinde zu spalten und zu entfernen.
והושיבו אותנו לאורך הגבולות איפה שפינו את הפלסטינים, איפה שגירשו את הפלסטינים, מוסררה זה על הגבול, ממש ירדן ישראל, שמו אותנו על הגבול. הנה הם שמה ואתה פה. אתה רואה את הערבים שהשארת במרוקו, הנה הם שמה.
Sie haben uns, ausdrücklich uns, in dieselben Dörfer und Siedlungen und Quartiere geschickt und besiedelt, wo die Palästinenser vertrieben wurden, damit wir den Palästinensern gegenüber, die auf der anderen Seite der Grenze jetzt sitzen, damit wir dort
היו תנועות ציוניות שעסקו בשיקום היהודים שבאו מהשואה. ההסתדרות הציונית, ויצו, נעמת וכל מוסדות ההסתדרות הציונית.
Alle zionistischen Organisationen, verschiedene hat Namen gewählt, die sich bemüht haben um die Überlebenden der europäischen Shoah.
וכמובן שהייתה להם בעיה שלא היה להם ילדים, והם התחילו לחטוף את הילדים שלנו הקטנים. אמהות שלנו הלכו ללדת וחזרו בלי תינוקות, והאמהות שלנו החזיקו את התינוקות והניקו אותם, והם אומרים, איפה התינוק שלי? אמרו, הוא מת. וככה חטפו למעלה מ50,000 ילדים, יעבירו אותם לאמריקה ולמקומות אחרים, לניצולי השואה.
Und viele dieser Familien von Überlebenden aus der europäischen Shoah in Israel, aber auch in anderen Ländern auf der Welt, hatten keine Kinder oder wenige Kinder und sie haben unsere Kinder gekidnappt und haben sie ihnen verkauft.
עד היום מתנהל מאבק קשה מאוד, וביבי נתניהו נתן הוראה לקבור את התיקים לעוד 70 שנה, שאף אחד לא יכול לראות אותם.
Bis heute kämpfen wir, es geht um mehr als 50.000 Säuglinge, die gekidnappt wurden. Bis heute kämpfen wir darum, dass diese Sache aufgearbeitet wird und Netanyahu hat beschlossen, diese ganze Sache weiterhin für weitere 70 Jahre zu begraben.
והדבר הנוסף, הפשעים נגד האנושות שנעשו בגדול ובגלוי, בלי לפחד, כשהם מקבלים את האישורים של האמריקאים ושל מוסדות הבריאות של האום, לעשות ניסויים גרעיניים עלינו, קוראים לזה גזזת. אני לא יודע איך קוראים לזה באנגלית, כן, אבל...
DDT.
כן.
ringworm, no, ringworm.
לא, לא.
ringworm,
נכון, כן. כן.
Kenne ich nicht.
Du kannst übersetzen.
Okay. Also Sie haben auch biologische Versuche auf uns gemacht mit dem Einverständnis von Amerika, Europa und so weiter.
Ja, also Mizrahi-Kinder wurden bestrahlt mit Röntgenbestrahlung gegen eine ästhetische Krankheit. Sie heißt Ringworm, das ist eine Art Wurm, das der Kopf befällt und Alopecia, also Haarausfall auslöst. Und das war tödlich für viele Mizrahi-Kinder und die Archiven sind auch verschwunden.
אפשר למצוא את זה באנגלית באינטרנט, אפשר למצוא את זה. עכשיו, אני, בכל המשפחה שלי, בעשרות אלפים, אולי 100,000 ילדים ומבוגרים, כולל גם פלסטינים שהיו תחת ממשל צבאי, שעברנו את הנישואין. הרבה מתו בנישואין, הרבה נשארו נכים, והרבה אנשים שבאה מוטציה אחרי שנים שהתפתחו אצלם כל מיני גידולים ומתו מחלות קשות מאוד.
Viele tausend Kinder, vielleicht sogar 100.000 von uns, aber auch von Palästinensern wurden bestrahlt und viele starben, viele sind krank bis heute, viele wurden später krank.
הייתי ילד, והאנשים האלה שעברו את החוויה הזו כמוני, לא ידעו שהם סוחבים איתם מחלות קשות. עד שאנחנו נתבגר, והזמן יעבור, ואז אנחנו נמצא את עצמנו נכים. ואני כבר פעיל חברתי, אני מתחיל לארגן הפגנות, מתחיל לארגן מלחמה, ואז הכנסת מקבלת חוק, לתת פיצויים לאלה שעברו את הגזזת. כמו השואה.
Erst als ich schon politisch aktiv wurde, haben wir es geschafft, dass wir Entschädigung für diese Versuche erhielten.
אוקיי, אז לסיום, כשאני היהודי היחידי בעולם הציוני, שנשללה האזרחות שלו בגלל הפעילות הפוליטית שלי בפנתרים השחורים.
Ich bin der einzige jüdische Israeli, der 40 Jahre lang ohne israelischen Pass in Israel gelebt hat, weil meine Staatsbürgerschaft wegen meiner politischen Aktivität annulliert wurde. Erst 40 Jahre danach erhielt ich sie wieder.
ואני רוצה לגלות לכם, כשהמוקטעה הופצצה על ידי ישראל, ויאסר ערפאת ישב בתוך ההריסות שלו, ישבתי איתו שמה, ודיברנו הרבה. ובשלב מסוים הוא עזב את השולחן עם כל הישראלים שבאו לשם אליו בשנת 2011, לא, סליחה, ב-2002, כן? הקים אותי מהשולחן, אמר לי בוא איתי, חיבק אותי, והתחלנו לטייל בתוך המוקטעה המופצצת. וחשבתי שהוא רוצה לספר לי איזה סוד, או לדבר איתי פוליטיקה קצת. והוא התחיל לספר לי על הילדות שלו, עם החברים שלו היהודים הספרדים, בעיר העתיקה בירושלים.
Im Jahr 2002 hat die israelische Armee die Mukata bombardiert und viele Israelis sind gekommen, um zusammen mit Arafat dort zu sitzen, sozusagen um ihn zu beschützen. Und in einem bestimmten Moment mitten in diesem Bombardement hat er mich mitgenommen zu einem Spaziergang und ich habe schon gedacht, er will mir irgendein Geheimnis erzählen oder sowas, aber er hat mir einfach über seine Kindheit erzählt, in der Jerusalemer Altstadt mit den sephardischen Juden dort.
אז אנחנו היינו מכריזים וצועקים, כסף לשכונות ולא להתנחלויות.
Und wir schreien bis heute Geld für die Entwicklungsquartiere und nicht für die Siedlungen.
תודה רבה.
Dankeschön.
Okay. And our next speaker, thank you, Reuven. That was very emotive. Sit down. Iris Hefets, to my left, born in Israel, where she lived until 2002. A year into the second Intifada, she left for political reasons and settled in Berlin. She is a member of Jewish Voice for a Just Peace in the Middle East in Germany. She practices as a psychoanalyst. She's also a renowned activist and vocal dissident, opposing the crimes of Zionism and the rights of Palestinians. She was also a victim of persecution from the German police, who have her on their target. And she will talk to us about the psychological structures of Zionism and the place of Mizrahi Jews within this structure. So it relates very nice to what we heard from Reuven. Thank you, Iris.
Yes, thank you for the invitation to the first Jewish Anti-Zionist Congress, and I will speak here as a Jew, because I think it's also important for us as Jews, and it is also an identity issue, to object Zionism, or I would say to go through a decolonialization process from Zionism, because Zionism occupied and still occupying Judaism. And therefore, I think it's very important for us to go through that. Judaism is not only a religion, as Rada said yesterday. There is also something which is the Jewish people, and I think also the Palestinian can understand that, what it means to be in a diaspora, for example, for many years, to have a common, if you're a Jew, also a common mythology, which we see how Zionism make it into a concrete thing, but it is a mythology, the fact. Or the story, not the fact that Jews went out of Egypt and went through emancipation process. And we are also people who have many things in common. And I think it is important to go back to the Jewish position of being in a state of mind of minority, of people who lost the concrete land, and of people who know what does it mean to be dependent on other people. It is different than what we see in Zionism. I mean, the state of mind of Zionism is what we would say in psychoanalysis an omnipotent state of mind. Israel is behaving like we can do everything. We are not dependent on our neighbors. We are not dependent on our people. And unfortunately, all the Western powers are supporting this. Now, I think that it's important for us also as Mizrahis to go through this decolonialization process, because for Mizrahis, it's something else to be part of Zionism. So, for example, if an Ashkenazi soldier is going to kill Palestinians, he is killing the other people, which were being othered, because I mean Jews in Europe were the other, actually. For Mizrahi people, it is a different thing, because if you're killing someone who could be your brother or your father or your grandfather, you're killing part of yourself. And this is what happens to Mizrahis in Israel. It's the killing of the Arab part of each of this Mizrahi person, which is more like committing suicide. And this is what happens to Mizrahis, actually, with the time. We have to remember, and this is a fact, the Nakba was done by Ashkenazis. So the big crime, or the first crime that enabled the Zionist state to be a Zionist state was done by Ashkenazis. And afterwards, the Ashkenazi needed a majority of Jews in this region. And all the European Jews that could come to Israel, that was then founded, came or left to other countries. So they had no other choice but to bring people from Arabic and Islamic states. And these people were not Zionists, because Zionism is a European idea. So you had to force them to come there, which was and coordinated action of the Zionist institutions to bring as many Arabic Jews to the new state. But they were treated, you know, this is the crazy thing. After you expel more than 700,000 Palestinians because they are Arabs, you import, and it was really, I'm using consciously the word importing because it was really dealing with people's life. You import Arabs to the countries because they are, to the new country that was founded because they are Jews. But they were, of course, Arab Jews. And now they are also making half of the Jewish population in Israel. If we're thinking about the Arab population between the river and the sea, we have actually a majority of Arab people. If we count the Muslim, Christian, and Jewish Arabs, they are, of course, more than the Ashkenazi Jews that are, and non-Jews, for example. I mean, a third of a million of the new immigrants that came to Israel after the fall of the former Soviet Union are non-Jews, according to the halakha, but they are entitled to come according to the law of the Israeli state. Now, we see, for example, until now, how there is an identification of Mizrahis or Jewish Arabs with the Palestinian people. And of course, it's something normal in that sense that we as human beings, the more someone else is like us, then unconsciously we can identify with this person. So if you're a woman, for example, and you're pregnant, you can identify also with a pregnant woman in Gaza. It's easier, for example, because you know it's something that happens emotionally. You don't have to go through many conscious processes. So I read, for example, what an Israeli poet, Yonit Naama, who is originally from Yemen, wrote yesterday on her Facebook. And if we're talking about Yemen, we are talking really about Arab Jews. There is nothing less, I mean, more Arabic than Jews that came from Yemen. And she wrote, "At 6 in the morning, he crawls into my bed, still wrapped in sleep, and wrapped his thin arm around me. I turned to him, and he showered me with sweet kisses. And all I could see was Ahmed Zidan, whom I had gone to sleep thinking about, kissing the body of his mother, Reem, who had walked for hours to bring food to her family and was shot in the head at the food distribution site, kissing his dead mother and crying, wishing that the earth would be gentle to her, that her grave would shine for her, crying and kissing. Hell is here. How can we go on?" And I think it's not by chance that we see these identifications, and that the Zionist project is aiming actually to split the Mizrahi or the Arab Jews from their Arabic parts in order to avoid and to split this identification and to recruit the Mizrahi Jews. And unfortunately, it was a big success. So if the Nakba was done by Ashkenazi Jews, after 1967, actually, the Mizrahi Jews could experience an upgrade in their social situation. They were in the colonialist, ladder that is the practice, in practical life in Israel, the reality. They were then the managers of the Palestinians. They were the people who were above them, like in every colonial society. They went then to the army. This process of killing the Arabic parts of them was so successful that now they are part of this, I would say also when we are talking about psychological structure, they are part of this mafia. They are now crime brothers in a patriarchic system indeed of the Ashkenazis, and the way out is very hard. And therefore I think that the way out is also through Judaism, through this experience of living not as an omnipotent person who is above the others, but as someone who is, intertwined, that we are dependent on each other, no matter where we live, actually. And this is something that we have to knock or to dismantle in order to be able to live together and not to take part in the Zionist project.
Thank you, Iris. Very helpful in understanding. Our next speaker, Camille Levy, Sarfati, artist, an art curator, activist, and writer, and an educator. She chose to return to Algeria in 2000, to Tunisia, I did write Tunisia, in 2018 as an act of repair and resistance to both Zionism and French assimilation policies. She's been organizing and active with different collectives, Mizrahi collectives, including an anti-Zionist Arab Mizrahi collectives within the Jewish Transnational Network for Palestine, and SWANA. She's a co-founder of the Tunisian collective Nesij, which aims to encourage the mobility of artists and art workers and strengthen solidarity in the South. Currently, her research focuses on contemporary uses of ritual as a tool for political struggle, and she's working on a documentary film about the experience of return, challenging colonial and ethno-nationalist narratives. Thank you, Camille.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Can you hear me? It's fine? Okay. I'm very grateful and honored to be among you, among this beautiful Congress. I'd like to thank very much the organizers and the persons who've been preparing the space, driving us, cooking for us, and cleaning over the past 2 days. Thank you for this. So we are actually maybe the 4 only Arab Jews in this Congress, and we've been gathered in the same panel, which is interesting. And we're definitely talking about identity politics. I'm sorry, Ronnie. So I'll be talking about return. And sorry, English is not my native language, so I apologize for my accent. So as she arrived in Tunis around 1948, my grandmother, Aziza, became Odette, a very old-fashioned classic French name to fit the colonial French acculturation policies toward the Jews in colonized Tunisia. With her family, she had left Gafsa, an oasis in the southwest of Tunisia, where they were from, to reach Tunis, the capital, in the north. She was then 13. The plan was to leave to occupied Palestine, to Israel, a newborn settler colonial state that had just been set up by Western-led legal international structures. European Zionist missionaries had been very active at the margins of Tunisia, geographical, social, economic margins to which my family belonged in Gafsa. Once in Tunis, the capital, the Jewish agency refused to take the whole family on board because they would only need working-age young people who would soon become a class of Mizrahi labor to exploit to build the ethnocratic Jewish state on the land of Palestine. So my family stayed in Tunis for nearly 10 more years in quite miserable conditions. This is where my grandmother met my grandfather, who was born in an Algerian family who had emigrated to Tunisia after the Crémieux decree, le décret Crémieux, at the end of the 19th century. So in 1957, 1 year after Tunisia's independence, the entire family left Tunisia. Did they decide to? What was their will, their agency? In a context of general fear and confusion, this is still a very ambivalent and unclear question. My family was dislocated, to borrow a term dear to Ella Shohat, who I recommend all of you to read, between Israel, Palestine, France, and Canada. My grandparents moved to the south of France, near Toulouse, with their children, and never went back. My mom was the first one to be born there in the south of France. I was born there, and Tunisia became an unspoken, forbidden, silent shadow when everything in the family was yet Tunisian. The food, the superstitions, the curses, the accent, the skin, everything but our mode of identification. My mom, indeed, would always say she's Italian rather than Tunisian, out of shame in a very racist, Eurocentric French society. The dislocation, the erasure, the shame was the result of French colonial dividing strategies in Tunisia, then of assimilationist policies towards immigrants in France. It was the result of both Jewish and Arab nationalisms that complemented and still complement each other in the process of making impossible the complex, multi-layered identification of Arab, Swana, or Amazigh Jews, and the list goes on. More than a century of domination of Zionist discourse, which my family was nurtured, and in which I was also raised, has long forbid us to even symbolically identify or embrace with cultural and geographical areas to which our lineages belonged for immemorial times. My grandmother does not only spit to ward off the evil eye. She would also spit when, as a teenager, I would always systematically ask her to take me to her country, Tunisia. Jamais, never. As if to express an inconsolable resentment. In 2018, despite my uncles calling me a traitor, I decided to return. I took a one-way flight, one-way trip to Tunis, determined to settle and reroute ourselves, in the family cradle against everyone's opinion. Our family owned nothing in Tunisia. Graves would be the only trace. I had heard vaguely at home that the Jewish cemeteries had been destroyed in the country. They used to say back home, they don't even respect our dead. And yet, when everyone thought it was gone, I found Jojo's grave. Jojo was my grandmother's favorite little brother. He had grown up in Gafsa, drowned and died in La Goulette neighborhood, where I live now, and had to be abandoned in the Bita Hayim, the house of the living, which is how Jews, the term Jews used for cemeteries, when the whole family left Tunisia. The old cemetery in Passage neighborhood was indeed destroyed by Bourguiba short after independence. But Jojo had been buried in a more recent and less central cemetery, the Abergel cemetery, that remained active, so to speak, until today. Once in Tunisia, I quickly met Henda, the wonderful guardian and conservator of the Jewish cemetery, born into a Muslim family from Tatawin in the south of Tunisia. She helped me find Jojo's grave that was very much shattered and broken by time, as she did for so many of us, the returnees. I had his stone repaired to repair the living. Through his grave, my family would perhaps mourn the loss of Tunisia and recover memory. I have been living in Tunisia for 7 years now. Return has been the most beautiful, powerful, meaningful, fulfilling experience that I wish all the children and grandchildren of displaced people will one day experience. So, of course, the early days of amazement have sometimes made space for difficulties, a few difficulties. But what could be more precious than feeling home for the first time? Let me clarify. Returning Tunisia has nothing to do for me with territory. It is rather a movement, a process towards reclaiming the landscape, reclaiming the language, reclaiming the gesture that were taken away from us. Returns means building community, developing a whole new web of solidarities, of thoughts, of understanding. It means absorbing and embracing narratives that have long been built in the West as those of the enemy. It means unraveling, deconstructing the racialization and ethnicization of religion through the very misleading categories of Jews and Arabs. Return has been a very intimate and emotional move, but it was above all a political decision. A conscious act of repair, of restoring a lost link, a conscious act of resistance to Zionism, understood as a machine of destruction, erasure, and dispossession of the Palestinians, first and foremost, to the most tragic and painful extent, of the Afro-Asian Jews and the multi-millennial Jewish-Muslim world that belonged to us. Return in no way means idealizing the pre-colonial and intercommunal relations. Jews in the region do have experienced marginalization and discrimination for centuries as a minority. Nevertheless, let's not forget that the genocide of the Jews was the work of Europe, which was quick to invent the myth of the Judeo-Christian civilization in the quick aftermath of the war, the Second World War, to wash away its sins, to rewrite history, and to designate Islam as a common enemy, as Sophie Bessis, a Tunisian historian, brilliantly demonstrates in her last book. Nor should I fall in my turn into the trap of essentializing identities. I don't like the word so much. Identification is a continuous, moving, circumstantial process or even strategy. And return can be a step towards a liberated relation to the idea of identity, a way to regain power over narratives and to decide, what do I want to identify with or not, against all kinds of exogenous colonial assignments. To speak of Arab Jews is not to fix or simplify complex and multiple histories across the Jewish-Muslim world, but rather an attempt to challenge the arbitrary and artificial ethno-national categories traced by the French and English colonization, to reject the identity assignments carried by Zionism and consequently by Arab nationalism, which for too long have led us to believe that we must choose or give up one part of ourselves. What we are witnessing today, a continuous Nakba, a genocide against the Palestinian people in the name of Judaism, is the result of a collective failure. Our failure to produce stronger narratives, dreams, and perspectives than those offered to Jewish communities by Zionism over the past century. It is time for us all to imagine, I insist, to imagine a shared future that is truly liberated and emancipated from the Eurocentric nationalist paradigm. However, the Palestinian liberation movement is a national liberation movement. Having the privilege to think beyond nationhood first requires access to acknowledgement and sovereignty. On the contrary, for decades, Palestinian people have been systematically denied their very existence. As Jews, Palestinians are paving the way for us, and we have the duty to commit to their struggles through a position of humility, deep listening, and self-criticism. As Jews supporting the Palestinian liberation movement, it is our responsibility to dismantle the system of lies and propaganda long deployed by Zionism. We have strong tools for that. Art, storytelling, counter-mapping or counter-cartography, political education. In a time of censorship, family breakups, feeling of estrangement or excommunication, our intertwined liberation movements should serve as a political home for all of us. The diasporic thinking and thoughts of return could be a lead to new ways for political imagination. Reclaiming our rhizomatic, diasporic, sometimes opaque roots is not necessarily a matter of physical displacement. Return can also be a conceptual, symbolic, cultural, poetic, and critical tool for political struggle. A powerful way to counter the Zionist project of Kibbutz Galuyot, the gathering of exiles, and its conception of return embodied by the Israeli law of return that was passed in 1950, giving Jews the right to relocate and to acquire Israeli citizenship, to relocate in Palestine, of course. The very idea of return has long been misused by Zionist ideology as an attempt to justify morally, historically, and religiously the process of ethnic cleansing and colonization of Palestine. Let's reverse the wind directions. Return will remain a fundamental and non-negotiable right for Palestinians that we must collectively fight for. Thank you.
Thank you, Camille. Thank you very much. We are behind schedule, but we agreed that we give a short second term for any comments, but these will be short comments that our speakers want to respond. Okay, if you want to, okay. And then we will take one round of questions, and they will choose which question they want to answer from the questions that were asked, if that's okay.
רציתי קודם כל לברך את החברה שלנו, הטוניסאית. תברך אללה עליק.
Er begrüßt Sie auf Arabisch.
במדינות שלנו, במדינות האסלאם, היינו ברמה גבוהה, בהשכלה, באקדמיה ובתפקידים בתוך השלטון, במוזיקה ובכל התחומים שהיינו, ולא היינו צריכים להרוג אף אחד בכדי להגיע לעמדה הזו.
reagiert auf eine der Sachen, die Iris gesagt hat. In unseren Gesellschaften, in den arabischen Ländern, waren wir in sehr hohen Positionen in der Politik und in den Wissenschaften und überall. Und wir mussten niemanden umbringen, um aufzusteigen.
יש 10 ממדינות אפריקה והאסלאם, יהודים, שקיבלו פרסים בינלאומיים, כולל פרס נובל לשלום, ופרס נובל לפיזיקה ומתמטיקה וכל אלה. 10. אני אביא לך את הנתונים, אביא לך את התמונות של האנשים. כן, לא לשלום, עוד לא.
Es gibt viele, er sagt 10, ich weiß nicht, jüdische Nobelpreisträger aus den arabischen Ländern.
ולא היו צריכים להרוג אף אחד.
Und die haben niemanden umbringen müssen dazu.
אני יכול להעיד על עצמי ועל החברים שלי שאנחנו קיבלנו את הדרגה הכי גבוהה בבתי הסוהר של מדינת ישראל, שלא רצחנו ולא עשינו כלום, נלחמנו על החיים שלנו ועל הזכויות שלנו.
Wir haben die höchsten Positionen in den israelischen Gefängnissen erhalten, ich und meine Brüder und Schwestern, ohne jemanden umzubringen, ohne irgendein Verbrechen zu begehen.
אם אנחנו רוצים לחסל את הציונות, אנחנו צריכים לבקש רק דבר אחד, לסיים את הכיבוש. סופית.
Wenn wir den Zionismus begraben wollen, dann müssen wir nur eines machen, die Okkupation besiegen.
לא מדינה אחת ולא שתיים ולא שלוש. עם האנשים האלה לא חיים. הפרדה והפסקה של הכיבוש. טוטלית.
Es geht nicht um einen Staat, zwei Staaten. Mit diesen Menschen kann man nicht leben.
Okay, so we are going to take a few questions. It will be a short round. I see a very high hand here.
A very high hand. Once again, short and sweet and safe. Where was the high hand? There was the high hand. Nope.
High hand, short question. If you could elaborate on how do Mizrahi Jews in Israel, occupied Palestine, turned from feeling, empathy to their brothers and sisters from the Arab countries to suddenly being Zionists?
Yes, I have a theory, so I'll ask the question. The question is, Zionism has presented itself as socialism for a long time, right? I say that because somebody talked about socialism this morning and yesterday. And of course, El Shoat tried to build a bridge between the Mizrahi, their struggle, and the Palestinian struggle. And it didn't work, right? And one of the possible theories is that the Mizrahis develop an allergy to anything that had to do with socialism, with the left, because the left was the Ashkenazi establishment. Right.
No question?
Oh, this is a question. Okay.
Please, questions only. Thank you.
Gut, bitte eine Frage. Ich bin Kurde aus Syrien hallo? Ja. Ich bin Kurde aus Syrien und ich habe die Erfahrung gemacht. Ja, die Frage ist, wie verhalten, erstens, warum die Juden aus Tunesien nach Israel gegangen sind und in Syrien hat die Situation der Juden in Syrien sich verändert ins Negative, nachdem sie aus Syrien eben ausgewandert sind oder auswandern mussten. Das waren die zwei Fragen, bitte.
Danke.
In a sense, this is continuing the point that Laurent was making. Do you think on the panel, whoever wants to reply to this, that there is a chance, any chance, of turning the Mizrahi Jews into the bridge that they should have been, but never were? Is there some hope there anywhere?
I will hold the mic, thank you so much. I will hold the mic.
Oh, okay, yeah. Just wanted to ask Tammy, I think that was your name, about speaking as an American Jew who's been also on a somewhat return journey to Europe and related a lot to diasporism as a concept. I wonder if this plays a role in your kind of conception of return and what role that might be and what it might not be and why. Diasporism, the kind of idea of like the Bundes concept of diasporism, I would say.
Thank you so much.
Yes, my question to the whole panel would be, now that we see that we're at a very high qualitative point of Palestinian national liberation, what is the most effective means of, especially Mizrahi and Sephardim Israelis, to aid the Palestinian cause, to aid Palestinian national liberation, which in itself will liberate them from Zionism when it's hopefully done?
Thank you.
Yeah, this is just a small, maybe slightly peripheral question. Maybe I would direct it at Camille, because you were talking about the different layers of identity, also through the, what the Maghreb countries also experienced through French colonialism. And I'm sure you're familiar with the work of Ariel Azoulay and the way she decided to identify. I mean, it's been stressed how important the category of the Arab Jew is, and she made a sort of personal classification as a Muslim Jew, which of course sounds contradictory, but I think if one understands the frame of reference, it makes a lot of sense. And I was just curious whether you think that that's a useful kind of terminology.
Thank you first. I hope my question would be a good question. So we're talking about the concept of return, and especially to Arab and Muslim countries, and to reclaim Jewishness within those societies. But the thing is, I wonder, how do we do it in practice? Like in a physical form, like Ashkenazi Jews would have a lot of the time, they could get a passport, a European passport, and that kind of keeps the Arab Jews, citizens of Israel, kind of stuck, because they would then get, if they would get an extra passport, if they could, it will be a Portuguese one, and then it's again sending them to Europe, which they have nothing to look for there. So I wonder, with the whole geopolitics of it all, how do we confront that? Thank you.
Thank you.
So, as an Egyptian, and I live in the region, I, for example, grew up with my grandmother's story. Me and Camille were talking about it, where she would tell me about the beauty of Egyptian Jews. We had Layla Murad, and it was a very beautiful thing that we had, and my grandmother would always tell me this was a European problem. We didn't have a problem. Only had my problem with my neighbor because she'd never returned the cake plate. That was my only issue with her. So it was very beautiful. So I still had that concept of my grandmother, but then I go off and I meet the Arab Jews, and it was very scary for me that they now turned into the most vicious type of Zionism. And it's sad because I want them back, for example, in Egypt, but I'm realistic. I understand that there are still Arabs who are still holding on to what we grew up with, al-Musta'ribin, with, oh, but he's a Mossad agent for Israel. So it needs to be a two-way thing as well, because as Camille and I were talking, there is a mistrust. So how do you also address the Arabs who have now, the modern ones, the young ones, who have grown up with the idea of al-Musta'ribin, which is very much a thing, with the Haganas, with the Mossads of the world. So how do we do that?
Do we have enough questions? Yes, I will bring your mic back. And please excuse me, I do not mean to be impolite, but I would not like to snatch the mic away from your hand. That is why I keep the mic in my hand. Thank you.
So I see there are more questions, and I'm sure that there are a lot of interesting things to say. But we will have one response from each, and you can choose what caught your attention and the question that you want to answer, one or more, everything, in one go. So I will start with Reuven. Any response that you want to make, and then we will move to...
הייתה פה שאלה, האם השמאל האשכנזי הפך את המזרחים לימנים.
Er reagiert auf die Frage von diesem Herrn hier über die Identifikation der Aschkenasen mit der Linken, dem Sozialismus, was die arabischen Juden dann auf die rechte Seite geschlagen hat.
כמובן שהדיכוי של הפלסטינים ושל המזרחים נעשה על ידי השמאל והימין האשכנזי.
Die Unterdrückung der Palästinenser und der arabischen Juden war die Arbeit sowohl der Linken wie der rechten Aschkenasen.
והגדול מכולם, שמעון פרס.
Und der schlimmste war Shimon Peres.
אז אני, אין לי שום התרגשות מאיזה שמאל בישראל.
Was sich links nennt in Israel, das geht mir am Arsch vorbei.
ושומעים בגיל 82 עד כמה אני עדיין כועס.
Und ich bin immer noch, auch als 82-Jähriger bin ich sehr wütend.
אם יש בגידה, זה לא הבגידה של הציונים, זה הבגידה של השמאל.
Wenn es einen Verrat gibt, dann ist es nicht der Verrat der Zionisten, sondern der Linken.
אז אני והפלסטינים אומרים, אם אין אני לי, מי לי?
Und wir und die Palästinenser sagen, wir müssen für uns selber sorgen.
ראובן, השאלה אם אתה חושב שיש סיכוי שהמזרחים בישראל באמת יהוו איזשהו חלק משינוי לחזרה להיות חלק מהעולם הערבי.
ועוד איך, ועוד איך, ועוד איך. אנשים, לא משנה כמה הוא יכול להיות ימני המזרחי, שיהיה עם הפשיסטים הכי גדולים. יש לו קצת שמחה בבית, הוא מתחיל לשיר בפקר פילינסיני, ובנסה לפקרני, ודור עלי ביעני, והיק. אין, הוא חוזר. אנחנו במרוקאית אומרים, עמר הסתה חמת מקטנשש הזל כתוב. רקדנית בטן אף פעם לא שוכחת להרים את הכתפיים. זה המזרחי. זה היהודי ממדינות האסלאם. תתן לו קצת שקט. ומה שאני אמרתי, להפסיק את הכיבוש, תן להם 10 דקות להיות לבד, הם הולכים לאנשים ששכחו אותם במרוקו.
Auch der schlimmste Faschist, wenn er ein arabischer Jude ist, gib ihm 10 Minuten Ruhe und er beginnt arabische Lieder zu singen und er erinnert sich an seine arabische Seele.
תודה. איריס?
שומעים? Okay. Yeah, I would like to say something to what you said, Rahma, because it's a kind of, it's a kind of common knowledge which is not really based on reality. That the worst are the Mizrahi Jews. As for what they do to the Palestinians, Ilan Pape said it yesterday also. Of course, what the Palestinians are seeing, on whom they are meeting, are the people in the checkpoints or Mizrahi people who were trained to go and to kill a Palestinian in the West Bank because they look alike. Behind them, there is the head of Shabak, or Mossad, or all the people in Israeli politics who are Ashkenazi, and they have nice suits, okay? And they want us to think that these are the worst people, but it's not different. And I think Mizrahis, they are like every other person, so they became Zionist exactly like Orthodox Jews became Zionist. They were anti-Zionist, but if you live in a place, you become, whether you want it or not, you're becoming identified with this place. Because you live there, you speak the language, you're drinking the water, and you're eating the food, unless you do a conscious work against it. And this is not different for Mizrahis. Now, especially for Mizrahis, it's not that they had the chance to go back to somewhere, but I think also that this concept of return, and this is what you said, it's not a concrete thing. There is no return in life. I know I'm a party pooper now, and there are many people who want the Jews to disappear from Palestine and to go back to the place where they came from. No one of us can go back to the place where we came from, because it's not the same place. And also, you know, I'm a migrant in Berlin, and also, you know, many white Germans and Nazis, they want me also to come back, to go back to the place where I was before. I'm a migrant, and I think, and this is, I mean, the first migrant, Jewish migrant that came to Palestine were accepted as migrants. But if you're a migrant and you want to live with the other people, it's something else than if you're coming as a colonialist. So we all, I mean, many of us are migrants, especially, you know, Jews in the world, and we need a place where we can live in freedom and with the same rights, but not as a colonialist. So there is no real return in that sense. Also, you know, also the Jews that are Ashkenazi and they are coming back kind of, I mean, in Berlin or in Europe, I mean, Germany likes very much talk about the return of the Jews to Germany. And they are talking about it also if you're Yemenite and your 4 grandparents are from Yemen, they are talking about the return of the Jews. No, there is no return, it's a migration. And migration has especially meanings, and I think we have to differentiate between this and the return that you're talking about, if I understood it correctly, which is also a state of mind of reclaiming our past and history, and it means returning to the place where we live together in peace.
Thank you. I want to take the liberty to add just the fact that, you know, in Israel, half of the population don't go to the army, are not drafted for all kinds of reasons. And many of the people who are not drafted, who are Mizrahi Jews because they are in a very low socio-economical situation, they have been in trouble with the law, they are not recruited. Many of them are not in the army, are not part of this killing machine. So the ones that you see as the worst, no, they're not the worst. They are just the ground soldiers. They are sent to the front. Yeah? So we need to be aware of this myth. Camille.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to answer a few things about Ariela Azouley's idea of Jewish Muslim, Muslim Jews. I can relate to any category identification that is countering the Zionist construction of oxymoric categories of Arabs and Jews. So I would not use it for myself, but maybe in a few years I will, because I also believe identities don't exist, identification exists, and it's a moving process. So I used to say I'm an indigenous Amazigh Jew, whatever. Like a few years later, I'm calling myself an Arab Jew. Maybe in a few years I will say I'm a Muslim Jew. Whatever is countering this categorization, ethnicization of our presences and existence is good to me, especially in the perspective of Ariela Azouley, if it answers your question. Rahma, I enjoyed our conversation in the morning, and we were talking about this mistrust thing that, of course, we are experiencing, and how do we answer it? Well, I guess through friendship, through community building, through actually creating networks and like deep relations, being there or traveling there. I mean, I decided to move there and to live there constantly, but many people are coming back and forth from France or from the US or from Spain, or coming to Tunisia, staying 2 months, living, coming back. I mean, there is a whole movement. I'm not alone in this. It's also a collective movement of reclaiming. And I do believe this is a possibility. It's a hope, it's a hope to me that I don't identify as a Mizrahi, Chaim, to answer your question. So I would not use the idea of the hope of Mizrahim to build a bridge myself, because I'm not Israeli. I was never living there, so I don't identify myself as Mizrahi, but as non-European Jews, Swana Jews, Amazigh Jews, Arab Jews, Muslim Jews from other countries in the world. We have the possibility to create those connections within our societies or within the societies we decide to return to and to reroute. So of course, I have this hope. If not, I would have left Tunisia a long time ago already. I have this hope, and my experience of return is an experience that is full of hope and full of love and full of friendship. And I insist on this idea of friendship because this is what can lead us to a shared future. And I don't want to sound cheesy, like friendship doesn't mean not to acknowledge genocide, not to acknowledge the disaster that Jewish nationalism has done, of course, and French or English colonialism. I also believe that nostalgia and idealization is a political enemy. And I don't relate to those narratives of, oh, it was so beautiful and so harmonious and what happened and suddenly they left, because it's so many layers and so many factors that pulled and pushed the Jews from those places. And we have collectively to rewrite those narratives and acknowledge each one's responsibility in this massive displacement.
Camille, there was a question, why did they leave? I think you related to it, both of you, but if you can add one phrase or two, just to answer this technical...
Why did they leave?
Why did the Jewish population leave these countries?
First,
There was a question.
There is not one situation, like Iraq is very different from Morocco, Morocco is very different from Algeria or Libya. Like there are so many layers and factors and histories.
But there is a common line.
There was a common line, which is European colonialism that weaponized intercommunal fragilities or feelings of division or marginalizations that were used more deeply and more harmfully by Zionism and followed by, I'm sorry to say, by Arab nationalism also. That's how I feel.
Yeah. I think it's an important...
לפני שהתנועה הציונית בנתה את הרעיון שלה ואת החזון שלה על שקרים ועל קשר הדוק עם הגזענות האירופאית. בתחילת הציונות. לפני בכלל שהיו הבעיות מול הפלסטינים, עדיין כל האירופאים היו באירופה עדיין.
Noch bevor irgendein Konflikt entstanden ist mit der palästinensischen Bevölkerung in Palästina, hat der Zionismus seine Ideen auf den europäischen Rassismus aufgebaut.
אז נבנתה תוכנית של איך הם כובשים את המקום הזה שהם קראו לזה וילה בג'ונגל.
Und sie haben sich überlegt, wie können sie diesen Ort erobern, den sie die Villa im Dschungel genannt haben.
כאילו יש יער אין אנשים, יש אדמה אין אנשים, ואנחנו רוצים לבנות וילה במקום הזה, והם בתוכנית הזו שלהם, הם חושבים מי יבנה להם את הווילה, ואז הם חושבים על היהודים במדינות האסלאם.
Und sie wollten sich eine Villa in diesem Dschungel bauen, aber jemand muss diese Villa bauen. Und dazu haben sie die Juden aus den arabischen Ländern gebracht.
והם צעד אחר הגודל התקדמו ועשו את זה. באה מלחמת העולם השנייה ונתנה להם פרס נוסף אחרי ההולוקוסט בגרמניה, שכל הפושעים, כל מדינות אירופה הפושעת האלה, אמרו, אנחנו צריכים את הזבל הזה פה, בואו נזרוק אותם לארץ ישראל. יאללה, לארץ ישראל. שלחו את כל המנהיגות הציונית, עם כל הרעיון שלהם, לתוך המזרח התיכון.
Nach dem Zweiten Weltkrieg hat die zionistische Bewegung noch einen weiteren Preis erhalten, in dem ganz Europa gesagt hat, wir brauchen diese ganze Scheiße nicht, wir werfen sie nach Palästina.
וככה התחילו לאט לאט להכניס סוסים טרויאנים, כלומר עבריינים מתוך המדינה, מתוך המדינות בעיראק, בסוריה, במרוקו, בכל המקומות האלה, שיעשו, איך אומרים לזה, איך אומרים, להדליק אש.
Sie haben...
כן.
Sie haben Verbrecher rekrutiert in all diesen Ländern, im Irak, in Marokko, überall.
ואני אתן שתי דוגמאות אחר כך. דוגמה אחת בעיראק, הם הצליחו להקים שם מחתרות יהודיות, לסכסך בין הערבים, וכפי שאמרתי קודם, הם היו ברמה גבוהה שם ברדיו, בטלוויזיה, בפרלמנט, הכל, ושם הצליחו, איך אומרים, את הצעירים, להפעיל אותם מול הקשישים, מול המבוגרים.
Das bekannteste Beispiel ist der Irak, auch das erstaunlichste, weil eben die irakischen Juden in allerhöchsten Positionen im Staat gewesen sind. Und sie haben es tatsächlich, die Zionisten, geschafft, die junge Generation gegen die etablierte Schicht aufzuwiegeln.
השיא היה שהם ארגנו את הפרהוד. את הפרהוד, שלקחו עבריינים מתוך עיראק, אנשים מתוך הקבוצות העברייניות שקיבלו כסף, כולל שוטרים שקיבלו כסף, כולל חיילים שקיבלו כסף, ועשו איזה מיני פורענות. לא כמו בפולין וזה, מיני פורענות שקוראים לזה פרהוד.
Und sie haben den Farjoun organisiert, das war der Pogrom im Irak.
במרוקו הם לא הצליחו. יש סופר, איש ביטחון, שכתב את הספר, קוראים לו סגב.
תום סגב?
תום סגב, שכתב ספר על העלייה היהודית ממרוקו. ושם המוסד ניסה במשך 5 שנים לעשות את אותה פעולה שעשה בעיראק ונכשל.
Und der Mossad hat dasselbe in Marokko versucht, 5 Jahre lang vergeblich.
לכן ב-1950 יצאו מעיראק, ב-1950 יצאו 220,000 יהודים מעיראק.
Nach dieser Aktion im Irak
שחתמו שהם מוותרים על הרכוש שלהם, מוותרים על הכל.
haben 220.000 Juden Irak verlassen.
מתימן 70,000 יהודים עזבו את תימן ובאו.
Aus Jemen 70.000.
וממרוקו רק 18,000 איש.
Und aus Marokko nur 18.000.
עד 64.
Bis 1964.
של האירוע של נאסר שבא למרוקו והתחיל שם להלהיב את הזה, ואז האנשים נכנסו לחרדה ויצאו משם. הם לא היו עוזבים את מרוקו לעולם. אני כתבתי הרבה על זה. אני יהודי מרוקאי. שבאתי מרצוני הטוב, כן? והבית שלי זה מרוקו. מרוקו, אף אחד לא ייקח אותה ממני, היא פה אצלי בלב. וככה היא בלב של כולנו, כל האנשים האלה. מרוקו אף פעם לא פגע בנו.
Ich bin marokkanischer Jude und niemand wird mir Marokko wegnehmen. Marokko hat mir nie jemals etwas Leid getan.
Okay. As for the question, why did they leave? I mean, we have to remember we are talking about a colonialist world in which the French are living, for example, the Maghreb, and the Jews were placed in this colonial world above the Muslims. They were the people who had the bureaucracy. In Tunisia, they got sometimes also French passports in contrast to the Muslims. So they were afraid, like in every colonialist structure, like it could be also, it was the case also in Vietnam, that after the colonial power is leaving, that they will be damaged. In addition, this liberation of the colonial, the Maghreb was done with Arab nationalism, and it was also a threat for them, especially when there was a nationalism in Israel, and they were torn in the loyalty between these two communities with a lot of propaganda. And we have to remember the Zionist movement is a movement that moved millions of people around the globe. So there were Zionist agents that were very active in many communities, and they were just dismantling these communities. And Judaism is a religion that you need a community to practice it. So when the whole community is living one after the other, you're also living. So altogether that caused these big movements. In some places they were forced, like in Iraq, or in Morocco sometimes their children were kidnapped by the Mossad and they have to follow the children. Yeah. And another question is for socialism. Socialism in the Zionist movement was always socialism for Ashkenazis. So it was an Ashkenazi kibbutz, and next to it there was, for example, in Sderot, which is a place where Moroccan people lived, they worked in the factory, in the meat industry. For example, like in South Africa, this is like in Apartheid, and they were dependent upon this labor of the Mizrahi people. It was never a socialism in that sense that everybody has the same rights.
Thank you, Reuven, Abergel. Thank you, Camille, Levy, Sarfati. Thank you, Iris Hefets and Uri Shani for the translation. And thank you for the audience for your patience. We will be back. It's a 10-minute break. At 12:30, we are back and starting the next session. Thank you.